the funding you've already secured. A little bit on today's agenda. We'll provide an overview of the various federal resources. If you could go to the next slide, please. A little bit on the agenda. So I'll cover some of the federal resources that we've identified that may be relevant to your work. And then you'll hear from my colleague, Eric Foster, who will cover various state programs and other economic development opportunities. Then we'll have time for Q&A. Hopefully we can address as many questions as possible. And then we'll also be sharing the slides and other resources after the presentation. Shifting now to federal programs. I'll be focusing in on programs stemming from two major pieces of legislation that Congress recently passed. So the first is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill. So the president signed this into law just over 1 year ago. This was a package of $1.2 trillion in funding, specifically to upgrade infrastructure across the country. Approximately $80 billion of this was directed towards clean energy and climate. The second package is the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, which was signed into law much more recently in August. So this package included $370 billion in funding for clean energy and climate change, and roughly $60 billion of this is allocated for environmental justice. So I should note that particularly with the IRA, a lot of these programs are in various stages of implementation. They're not yet sending money out the door. Some of these programs are entirely new. So DOE, EPA, DOT, these other agencies are having to staff up and create new programs from scratch. So, just wanted to flag that the funding is not yet coming out, but it should be coming out over the next year or two. So with that said, we did identify several resources you may want to bookmark that will be periodically updated as new resources and information become available. So diving into the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law on the next slide, you can see we've highlighted a few resources, including CEBN's blog series on the bill, DOE's landing page, which covers their energy-related bill programs, and then a very comprehensive guide to bill through the White House. So diving into a few of the relevant programs for your work, the bill provides $7.5 billion in funding to build out a national EV charging network. So if you're involved in EV charging infrastructure, definitely want to check out these programs. So this funding is flowing through state agencies, energy offices, departments of transportation at the state level. And much of this funding is targeted specifically for rural, disadvantaged, and hard to reach areas. So we've highlighted a link there on the slide where you can access each of the unique state plans across the 50 states, plus DC. It's at driveelectric.gov. And I did see someone asked whether the slides will be made available. We are going to be providing that copy of the slide deck to you after the presentation. Shifting to the next item, we have the Weatherization Assistance Program. So this is an existing program, but Bill injected $3.5 billion into this program. And this is for technical and financial assistance for energy efficiency upgrades for low-income households. So more specifically, this means low-income households are eligible for upgrading their insulation, their roofs, and installation of energy-efficient lights and appliances to save energy and their utility bills. Moving on to the next item, we have the energy efficiency and conservation block grants. So this is allocated through states, local governments, and tribes who are eligible for $550 million in funding to reduce emissions and enhance energy efficiency. Then we have a program specifically designed, it's a pilot program specifically designed to boost energy efficiency at nonprofits, their facilities. So definitely want to check out this program. It's money specifically set aside to improve your energy efficiency performance in your buildings through lighting upgrades, new roofs or insulation upgrades as well. So do check that one out. It could help you all save money and deploy clean energy technologies all at the same time. Finally, we have the energy improvements in rural or remote areas. So this is $1 billion that is set aside for states, cities, tribal groups, and community-based organizations to improve resiliency and reliability of energy generation. So that's a few of the programs within the bipartisan infrastructure law that we think might be relevant to your work. This is by no means an exhaustive list. So do check out those resources we've highlighted at the top. Feel free to poke around those resources and explore other programs as well. And like I said, not all of this funding is rolling out the door yet. So do, bookmark those pages and come back to them and check them as new information becomes available. So moving on to the next slide, we'll jump into the Inflation Reduction Act. So as I previously mentioned, the IRA includes $369 billion in funding to support clean energy and climate initiatives. Of this $369 billion, roughly $60 billion is targeted for environmental justice initiatives. So this funding is going to be flowing out into the broader economy in three main ways. The first is through tax credits. The second is through rebates for consumers. And then the final bucket is through grants, loans, and other similar mechanisms. Diving into the tax credits themselves, you see we've highlighted two resources at the top there. One is the White House's guide to clean energy tax credits for consumers. And then we also have a DOE guide as well for solar tax credits. Before I get myself into any hot water, I should caveat that I'm not a tax attorney. I can't provide formal tax guidance to you or your organization. So please do consult your legal counsel if you're unsure of anything. Jumping into the specific tax credits. So previously, we had the investment tax credit, which was at 26%. This is used for businesses and other developers, primarily for solar projects to receive a 30% tax credit. So that was previously at 26%. IRA boosted that back up to 30% and extends it through the end of 2024. I will highlight two relevant bonuses. So one 10% bonus credit for projects in a low-income community or on Indian land, and then an additional 20% bonus for projects built on a low-income residential building. So this means that if a project is cited in these particular areas, this project could potentially be eligible for up to 50% in tax credits. So those bonuses are layered on top of that 30% base credit. And then I should also mention that beginning in 2025, there will be a new technology neutral tax credit regime. So previously, tax credits have been technology prescriptive based on the specific technology and we're going to be shifting beginning in 2025 to a more flexible regime. So IRS will be putting out guidance that details which technologies are considered zero carbon and will be eligible for the 30% tax credit going forward. So with that said, I mean, the usual suspects such as wind and solar will be eligible through the duration of that tax credit regime through 2032. But did just want to flag that the mechanism does change slightly there. So we also have a few other tax credits I wanted to highlight. We have the residential energy efficiency tax credits. So residential facilities are eligible for a 30% tax credit up to a limit of $1,200. So this is for energy efficiency improvements through 2032. And then we also have the residential clean electricity tax credit. So this is the residential, so mainly for solar projects on residential homes. The 30% tax credit is extended out to 2032. And then I did want to touch briefly on the clean vehicle tax credits. So this will establish a $7,500 tax credit for new electric vehicles through 2032 if manufacturers meet certain provisions. So there are various guidelines that will be released in the coming months from the IRS dictating which specific cars are going to be eligible going forward based on domestic content and other requirements they will have to satisfy. One very new and exciting aspect of these tax credits is they can be transferred to the dealer at the point of sale to knock off $7,500 directly off the price of the vehicle as it's driven off the lot. And in addition, there is a one-time $4,000 tax credit for used EVs. So in other words, the second individual or family to own a new EV would be eligible for that $4,000 credit. And in addition, there is a commercial electric vehicle tax credit for 30% as well. And then finally, I did want to highlight a new feature in the tax code that is referred to as direct pay. So this provision enables non-tax-paying entities like nonprofits and Native American tribes, which were previously unable to leverage these tax credits. It enables those entities going forward to receive direct cash payments for the value of the tax credit. So this is an exciting new mechanism that will open up the value of these tax credits to entities that previously have been left out. So nonprofits, Native American tribes will now be eligible to leverage this mechanism going forward. On to the next slide, we'll cover energy efficiency rebates.
Andy, before you go on.
Yeah, sure.
I just saw that there was a good question in the chat. I wanted to pause really quickly and address this, which is there any money, or basically, is there education to consumers about these credits and rebates? And I would just say, I think short answer is there's not, I'm not aware of resources like money to your organization specifically to educate consumers about these credits and rebates, but certainly talking to your communities could be an eligible use of the projects. You know, if you're trying to find funding to help deploy clean energy in your communities, that could be wrapped into your IEIP project or other types of grants you may encounter. And, you know, definitely also consider us a resource, as well as the websites that we are directing you to from the White House and other resources. We will be sharing a whole variety of links that you can use in that education, but if you are looking for partners to help communicate about those tax credits and rebates, we can be a resource, and a lot of our partners can as well.
That's helpful. Thank you, Lynn. I will add to that. I think there are funding streams in IRA through grants and other mechanisms that are intended to provide technical assistance on various energy programs. So as we get into those might be the relevant programs that might provide resources for you all to educate folks in your community on these various rebates and tax credits and so forth. So on the rebates, I did want to highlight Rewiring America, which is a nonprofit, put out a helpful guide to these rebates. The program is called the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Program. So this provides point of sale rebates to consumers. So at the point of sale, they're purchasing these appliances at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. They're able to receive those rebates directly. There is a maximum rebate limit per taxpayer per year of $14,000. And I will also note there are income thresholds associated with this program. So 100% of costs are covered for low income households, and 50% of costs are covered for moderate income households. And the information on sort of those thresholds, I think, is forthcoming. There's a lot of guidance from various federal agencies that is yet to be published. So do stay tuned for that guidance as it comes out. On to our next slide. We'll cover some of the other programs in IRA, starting with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So EPA has a helpful overview of this fund. It's, I think, useful to think of this as a national green bank. So this funding mechanism provides $27 billion to be allocated to states, municipalities, and tribes for financing clean tech deployment. And then 15 billion of this 27 billion is specifically allocated for either low income or disadvantaged communities across the country to deploy zero emission technologies or projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So again, this is sort of a national green bank sort of model. We've seen state level green banks where they're doling out funds to capitalize clean tech projects. This sort of national green bank model will be federal dollars that we will be allocated to state mechanisms, energy offices, and so forth to dole out those funds at the state level. So keep an eye out for this program as we get more information in the coming year. Moving on to our next item here, we have rural development. So if you are active, if your footprint is active in a rural area, there's roughly $14 billion in IRA specifically set aside to spur clean energy deployment, energy resilience in rural areas through grants and loans for rural electric co-ops, for instance. Do keep an eye out for these programs. These are going to be run out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and they have put out a helpful overview of these funding streams. On to the next item. Finally, we have a cluster of programs that are designed to help address environmental justice concerns in disadvantaged communities, which disproportionately bear the brunt of energy costs, air pollution, and other negative environmental impacts. So starting at the top there, we have the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, which is run out of the Loan Programs Office. This is an existing program. However, IRA injects a lot more funds to raise the loan authority tenfold from 2 billion to 20 billion. So tribes are eligible for loans to build power generation, transmission, or distributed energy projects. Wanted also to highlight the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program. So there's $3 billion set aside to be administered by the Federal Highway Administration in economically disadvantaged communities to improve affordable transportation access or walkability of neighborhoods. Then I also wanted to flag the Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grants. So this is $3 billion for community-based nonprofits, tribes, or local governments to deploy low and zero emission and resilient technologies or projects that address extreme heat, boost climate resilience, or indoor air pollution. And then I did want to flag the last item on this list as well. So this program, improving energy efficiency, water efficiency, and climate resilience in affordable housing. This program is going to be run out of HUD, the Housing and Urban Development. So there's $1 billion specifically set aside to improve energy and water efficiency or deploy zero emission power generation at those facilities. So do keep an eye out for that program as well as it moves forward. And so that covers a wide array of programs across the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. I hope I haven't inundated you with too much information. Again, we're going to be following up with the PowerPoint deck, which has links to various resources that you may find helpful, especially as new information comes out on these programs. So with that, I will say at the end of our session, we're going to be holding time for Q&A. But next, I wanted to pass things over to my colleague, Eric Foster, who will cover additional sources of funding. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Andy, and good afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing today? So you've been able to get your initial start with the IEIP. We've given you direction for other dollars through the bid for, as I like to call it by its government name, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJ, and the IRA. I love acronyms. But now we're going to take you on a little journey to continue running towards other sources of funding that you and your organizations can go after that can be helpful to expand the footprint of your projects and keep the sustainability of these activities going long into the future. So first, we're going to go to, if we can go to the next slide. So the federal government. The federal government has a lot of dollars that are out here that you can go after for specific programming and activities, including in the Economic Development Administration, which is in the Department of Commerce. The Economic Development Administration has a litany of programming that they roll out, everything from equity impact investments, trade assistance, research and national technical assistance, programming, and I'm going to just talk through a few of the things that they have in that particular area. They have the National Economic Resilience Data Exploring with Oregon National Labs. They have the Economic Development Writing and Lecturing Series, which I think will be important in helping you understand how to go after and prepare to build other funding streams and other narratives to help you with building other funding streams for economic development tied in to your particular projects, especially in small metro and rural areas. And that's through NADO Research Foundation. Then they have a revolving loan fund learning center program, which is tied into the Council for Development Finance Agencies. That's another area to really help you get and ability to get access to additional information of how to go after and then secure and then manage those sorts of funds and those sorts of programs. So those are just a few there. Then within the USDA, as mentioned, they have other programs that are in addition to and outside of just the ones that were mentioned with respect to everything from they've got bio-preferred programming, they've got biorefinery, renewable chemical and bio-based product manufacturing assistance, higher blend infrastructure incentives. So there's dollars that are in the Department of Agriculture that can relate to or tie into the projects that you're working on and how they can be built towards building that infrastructure of small business, of job training and growth for your particular community that you can then use with partners or work with partners, both in the private sector and in the public sector to secure, to be able to help you grow what you are doing, because what you're doing out here is extremely important. And we want to help you with that. And we'll have links to all of this in a resource document that we've put together that'll give you links to all of these other programs that they have. There's a rural energy pilot program. That's another one in the USDA and rural development. So they have a lot that really can get to adding other sources for you as organizations. And this is all outside of the IIJ, BLA, BIL, and the IRA. So, and then there's also the TAA centers, which are another resource at a federal level broken into regions to provide additional technical support and guidance to organizations that are building and doing community and economic development activities. And that's another branch under the Department of Commerce. If we can go to the next slide. So also and also want to bring up, going back to the USDA, they have some additional dollars in areas such as community facility, direct loans and grant programs, water and waste disposal loan guarantees, community connect grants, rural business development grants. So they have a plethora of opportunities starting in this next fiscal year that your organizations or your collaborative partners could be eligible for. And I also want to go to another department that is not really spoken of a lot, but it's in the Department of Health and Human Services. And this particular department is this is still in the Economic Development Agency, the Community Economic Development Program. So that's another program that has dollars to support activities. It's a grant program for employment of individuals from low-income communities facing persistent poverty and high unemployment by investing in community development corporations to create and expand job opportunity. So that is another linchpin, and they tie in some of their programming activities to help communities that are specifically dealing with replacing positions and jobs that were in the old energy economies, the traditional O&G, such as coal or fossil fuels. And how do you help those communities and the employees and the workforce make that transition? Well, there's monies there in that line item of programming that they have where you'd be able to work with those organizations. I also did want to mention too, and going back to the Department of Health and Human Services, it's not a bullet that we have, not a graphic that we have here in the slide, but they have a department as well, the Office of Community Services, which supports community economic development projects. They also have a Council on Environmental Quality, which provides dollars and support for climate and economic justice programming and activities. They have a screening tool for you to be able to go to develop to see what your potential program or potential activity could be and how it may fit and apply for funding through their particular programming. And then also in the, there's one other area that I wanted to go to on the federal level, which was the USGA, the GSA, and they have programming as well for small business resources, everything from training, from governmental contracting, which can create additional opportunities because there are dollars and programs through the federal government that you all as organizations can partner with others to build and be able to do work for different branches of the federal government that may extend the work that you're doing. So there is a plethora of opportunity to spur continued economic activity through different agencies in the federal government. We haven't even got to the SBA or others. There's just so many. It's you know, it was fun kind of going through to see all of these different areas and learn. And trust me, we've not scratched the whole surface of everything that's out there, but we will continue to work to bring that information to you so you'll be able to learn and implement these tools to help you all with your organizations. Now, next, let's move to looking at state level. And state level, there's a number of ways you can approach state partnership opportunities. Of course, you can work through your state departments, be it if it's economic development or commerce, through the particular states, or if you're in Puerto Rico, that you can work through for grant programming that they have that is specific to the state. Some of it is dollars that they may get from the federal government. And then a lot of it is programming that they'll get from their own budget allocations to support and spur economic activity, workforce development, and building within their own state geographical areas. There's an interesting resource that we found too, which is the state incentive database. Now, it's a pay site, but they have aggregated information for all of the various incentive, grant, and funding programs, loan programs that are out in all 50 states, plus in the territories, including Guam, the Northern Marianas Islands, Puerto Rico, and America Samoa. And there are, yes, and do we have a link for that? Yes, we do. I'm gonna put that into the chat right now. And hold on, let me go because I have to put it to everybody. Yeah, I'm trying to catch up with this technology, guys. Load over here, but they have tax credits, loan programs, tax exemptions, grants. And so, and just some new programs that they've added to the site include in the state of Alabama, there's a Research Development Enhancement Fund program. In the state of Arkansas, there's a Wood Energy Products and Forest Maintenance Tax Credit. There's employee ownership tax credits. There's meeting and event incentives. In Illinois, they have a Reimagining Electric Vehicle Illinois program. So there's another one, a Care Source Diversity and Social Impact Fund. So there's a lot of programs. They have over 2,000 individual programs across the country and the US territories where you'll be able to pull information from and be able to access. Like I say, it's a pay site, but I think it's worth the investment. But then individually, if you go through each of your individual state sites, and that's one tool that we found through the Economic Development Agency in the Department of Commerce, they have a link that gets you to each individual state and the directory for each of those individual states with respect to the programs that they have and offer, but also within those, all of the different regional agencies, because that's another thing that you want to think about. That's why we have Greater Chattanooga Economic Partnership, because it's not just your state level, it's your regional level as well. So your county governments working with the private sector as well as with state support to do regional cluster activities to support the projects that you're working on and projects that have companion adaptability to what you're doing. Just saying Alabama is a good example. You've got economic development districts such as the Northwest Alabama Council of Local Governments, the Regional Planning Commission of Greater Alabama. You've got research centers, University of Auburn, War Eagle, Government and Economic Development Institute. And then you even have revolving fund grantees such as Jefferson County, Lee Russell Council of Governments. So there's a whole litany of funding opportunities just there in the state of Alabama, within those particular buckets. Let's go to the next slide. Then also you're going to want to look at working with your various chambers as well as other community development partners. So the Chamber of Commerce's are also strong allies that can help further your activity and the inputs of your activity. Here we have a cluster of chambers from the state of Alabama, and then we have a coalition of various sector partners in the state of California, from the college and university level to the municipal level to the nonprofit, community development, and other specific specialized nonprofit agencies, but all working together in building that community resiliency and growth. This is where you have to get outside of the box, because it's not just going to be getting dollars from the specific programs that we mentioned at the federal level, but it's bridging into these other partnerships at the municipal level, at the county level, with Chamber of Commerce's, with universities, community development corporations, other entities that are working together to support the community, but may not know that you're there, or you may not know that they're there. So it will take an extension and branching out. And like we said, the resource doc that we'll be sending out after this will have links to all of this for every state, plus Puerto Rico, for you to be able to access and drill in and get information. Let's go to the final slide. And so also, when thinking about the outreach and activity, you also want to look at minority organizations, minority business associations, minority chambers of commerces, minority trade groups in different industry sectors, because those can be additional partnership opportunities, additional groups that you can work with, because they also have a vested interest in spurring the growth and development of their specific communities, be it if it's in the African American community, the Hispanic and Latino community, the Arab and Chaldean community, the Indigenous Native American community. They're all potential partners and allies to help you get to not only sustaining what you're doing today, but thinking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, how have you all had impact through your programming so that you're actually changing the trajectory of your communities. You're improving the climate, you're improving the economic opportunity, you're improving the business resiliency, the worker resiliency. This is something I have a lot of passion in, and I'm glad that we're working in this space, because these are the things that are going to be generational in changing and improving climates and communities. I'm gonna be quiet now because I really want us to get to the Q&A and hope that you all have a lot of questions so we can delve in and help you broaden and expand your lane so that you can grow your programs and grow your impact. So with that, I'm gonna be quiet and turn this back over to either Lynn or Andy so we can move to our Q&A and get your questions answered. Oh, I'm sorry, there was this last sheet too, homework. And that's Ally.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to jump in and go through the homeworks. You may remember from the DC Summit that following our overview of our clean tech funding database and other power connectors funding resources, we gave sort of a Google Sheets spreadsheet where you can input in things you're looking at applying for and when they're due, and kind of keeping yourself organized, and also making sure that you can do your homework and see what's happening. We're going to have a peer discussion that CVN is leading on December 16th. And we thought that might be a good time to sort of set as a goal. We can talk about the challenges you're having and how to address them. But if you want to try your hand at the homework, if you haven't already, we will put the link in the chat again. And now you have many more things to potentially add to that list. So once again, yeah, that'll be the link I threw in the chat. And I did just put the link to the presentation. We know there's a lot. So when you ask a question, if you want to look through and sort of find something you were confused about, feel free to use that.
Great. Thank you, Annabelle. So we do have time for Q&A, so feel free to drop your questions into the chat. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible. It looks like Jade has asked a question. Jade asks, which of these programs and funding opportunities would be the easiest to access and apply for with the most likely chance of success for the effort? So I don't know if this is a helpful response, but I would just say the chance of success is probably correlated with how closely your work aligns with the goals of the funding. So these programs have different goals. We walked through rural development, climate resilience, and various other topics. So I guess my best advice to you would be to try to hone in on those programs that best fit and align with the goals of your work, and go from there, and really try to read into the funding opportunity announcements when those are out, and try to do your best to see which opportunities align best with your work. I don't know if any others have any additional thoughts or insights to that one.
I do. I want to chime in because I want to take a line from a great instructive movie, Captain America: Civil War, where Spider-Man asked Tony and Rhodey, have y'all seen this old movie called Return of the Jedi? No, Empire Strikes Back.
I've seen it.
Yes. And so when they had to bring down the Imperial ships that were those snow walkers that were big, and they had these little ships, they had to be creative. They had to look at what their resources were and determine, all right, we've got these cables, we're going to have to wrap them around the cables. Those machines are slow walking, so once we get the cables around, they will trip, fall over, and hopefully explode. Well, that is what you kind of have to do in thinking about programs to apply for. First off, you're not going to bring down the Imperial killing machine unless you actually try. You're not going to get funding or opportunities unless you try. So that's the first thing to think about. There's no guarantee of success, and really nothing is ever just easy because there's always other people that are competing. But look at the different opportunities and align them with the resources and tools of what you're working with and what your community needs, and then go after those. So there may be 100 opportunities, but you may look at it and align and say that there's 10 really that we can utilize, 10 harpoon cables that we can utilize to bring down that Imperial machine. Get those 10. Apply for those 10 and take those shots. You never know. You just may save Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo. But if you don't, you're not going to. So please don't avoid taking the chance.
And I will just chime in. I don't have any fabulous movie references as Eric does. But, you know, I think one of the things that I think is being, so Jade clarified this. It's that cost of effort, you know, and then what's the likelihood of getting the funding? And it's kind of a combination of what Andy and Eric said. You know, one of the things I want to acknowledge is that we have thrown a lot of resources at you, a lot of different programs, and even just navigating that as a first step is a lot of work. But that's partly why we wanted to steer you towards some of these databases that are not going to be 100% comprehensive, but our partners at EFN and some of these other resources are doing a lot of the work for you in terms of finding the resources and collating them according to specific types of interests. So, you know, if anything, if you don't have time to comb through every single resource that we've thrown at you, you can start with some of these databases as low-hanging fruit. Then when you begin to look at the funding opportunities, it really is a combination of what Andy and Eric said. You will click on those and see, and it's hard. I wish I could say, Jade, that, you know, go after this and not this, but there aren't precise, uniform answers to that. I think, as Andy expressed, the more you seem to feel like your program is a really close fit for the mission, then that is worth spending the time, as Eric said, you know, going after those, you know, those stormtroopers and those fighters. It's worth it because your chances of success are reasonably high if you're very, very close alignment. But if you feel like, and I've had this experience myself with CEPN, if you're trying to kind of reinvent your program to fit, you know, a round peg in a square hole, that's probably a clue that that one is not worth your time. And I know, Jade, you're looking for some general guidance on types of programs. I'll give you a few hints. So one is the American Made Challenges program, which you're all a part of through the Inclusive Energy Innovation Prize. That is one of the easiest to access programs in terms of having a very simple application, very straightforward and minimal reporting. You know, but the prize amounts are generally in the order of tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you get into, there are certain grants, like, for example, Economic Development Administration will give you $1 million or more, but then it's going to be a little bit more detailed. So that's often the case, is that the size of the grant is somewhat tied to the difficulty of applying for it. Let's see, any programs that have more transparency on the awards, grants, or provide onboarding support. This is where, so it depends again on the specific program, but I think looking to your local state procurement, PTAC procurement, technical advice, procurement and technical, what is it, assessment centers or FAST centers, yeah. Kind of looking to local offices like that to help support you. There are a lot of these sort of pass-through programs to state level offices to provide assistance to applicants, and so those can be a resource as well. The power connectors, you know, one of the things we're going to talk about with this homework is when we come together in the next peer workshop, you're going to be going through the exercise of researching some of these grants and thinking through which ones are a good fit for you, taking notes, doing some homework. And then we want to come together and help support you and answer your questions. And this is an ongoing relationship. We are supporting you in this prize, but we're going to be working in this space, you know, across multiple funding opportunities, and can be a resource to you. And then finally, I would say, you know, I think to Jade's question, you seem to be asking mostly about grants for your organization. We have also presented information today about resources for your community, for the purpose of making sure that you're aware of those and can help serve as a conduit of information for your community. And some of those things, such as pass through, like rebates or tax incentives, those are pretty much a guarantee if you meet the requirements of the program. So that's not something you have to competitively be awarded. they're basically guarantees for your community. And you'll be surprised to see how much resource you can actually cobble together through things of that nature. You know, for example, if you are looking to get into the project development space and do some community-based solar or things of that nature, some of the new resources that make tax credits accessible to nonprofits may be a good fit for your organization. So hopefully, you know, I know it's an overwhelming amount of material, but hopefully that gets to, you know, some of your questions, and feel free to reach out as you come across things and are kind of trying to assess whether it's worth it or not. You know, we can do our best to give you our guidance on that front.
That's super helpful context, Lynn. Just wanted to see if there are any additional resources or questions I should mention. Jade did give a shout out to the CBN Clean Tech Funding Database. Thank you for that, Jade. That is a resource that's listed on this slide deck here, wherein, you know, CBN staff curates funding opportunities across not only the federal government, but state entities, clean tech incubators, accelerators, and other ecosystem support organizations. So do check that resource out. We try to keep that populated as much as possible. So do keep an eye on that resource.
Any other questions? And please, definitely, guys, take advantage of this. This is an opportunity. And I did figure out what those weapons were that I was mentioning. It was the all-terrain armored transports, those big four-legged with the, looked like a bear that had guns out of his mouth. And that's what they were using. But, you know, I only use that analogy to say that it may seem like it's a big obstacle to find those opportunities, and it's a challenge, and it's going to be difficult to get to that place, but you can get there. The first step is looking at what you have and then going forward from there to align with the tools you have to make the incremental steps to achieve your goal. So you can overcome your goal. I mean, you can overcome your obstacle.
Yeah, and the other thing is you can recycle a lot of material for different grant applications. And so, you know, I think to the extent that you develop mission statements and what is it you want to do, that's another lens through which you can look at these opportunities and say, have I already written some of the justification for this project? Because if so, that means I might be a very good fit. Yeah, and so to the point in the chat, feel free, you guys can also just unmute yourself. This is a small group, so it doesn't have to be so formal.
And I guess I'll just add, you know, we didn't want to inundate you with too much information. I fear that maybe I have with all the various programs I highlighted, but I will say at the very least, it's a good problem to have, that there is so much funding coming out and all of these programs designed to help address environmental justice issues and so forth. So at the very least, we've tried our best to pull together the relevant information for you to navigate those resources. Looks like Jade has an additional question. Larger federal funding announcements seem daunting almost. Should we work our way up to that? That is a good question. I don't know, Lynn, if you have any thoughts on that one, given your experience with the federal funding opportunities.
So I can just offer my perspective because we have applied for federal funding, you know, and sometimes we'll come across something that's pretty small and straightforward, requires a few slides, and we'll say, let's go for that, right? And then other times we've come across some things where we're like, gee, that is a lot of work. Are we a close fit? And to me, the answer is yes. If I think, wow, this looks like it was written for us, I feel really confident that we could execute this project. And actually being selected for the Power Connector contract was a good example of that. I think at the time we were just 2 people and this tiny little startup organization, but and some of the previous Power Connectors that had been selected were very specific to niche areas of support they were looking for. And then the DOE came out looking for groups that could help support recruitment, communications, outreach events. And we said, wow, that's a really good fit for us. And so it was worth the effort to put in that application. There have been other times where I felt like, yeah, we could maybe go after this, but we'd have to sort of restructure what we're already doing to fit it. You know what? There's too many things out there that it's not worth your time to invest in the time in those. So I would say, work your way up to it if you're not confident you could achieve the project just yet. Like if you feel like, man, if we got this money, I'm worried we'd even meet the deliverables, then maybe you're not ready yet. But if you look at it and say, this would give us a ton of resources, we could hire a bunch of people and achieve the deliverables mentioned, and it's a really good mission fit, be bold and be confident. I think you should go for it. So I see there's a couple more questions in the chat, but also Stan Johnson has a hand raised, so go for it.
Yeah, so this is an all learning process for me. So is this the only time we're gonna go over this? Because I got a lot of information, but I know I need a lot more. And like, how do I go through the processes, right? The 1, 2, 3s, ABCs, even if I got ready to, get ready for the grant and all that kind of stuff. This seems like just a ton of work for one organization to actually do. We have one grant writer. That person actually does our development. That person actually does X, Y, and Z. Like, are you guys going to walk us through these processes? That's my last question.
Yeah, so some of the other Power Connectors will be doing workshops more specifically focused on the grant writing process. And I'll tell you, I feel your pain, Stan. We don't have a grant writer. I'm the grant writer, and like and the garbage emptier and like 1,000 other hats. So we all totally feel you. But what I would say is, I would really urge everyone to try the suggested homework and come to our workshop, the peer workshop on December 16th, prepared, because basically it's one of those things you're going to learn partially by doing. So we want you to go through some of the databases, start pulling out a handful of opportunities, mapping out what they would be useful for, what would you do, write some notes. And then we want to come together in a peer conversation and really allow you to talk to each other about some of the tricks that you're finding, lessons learned, or just gripe about what a nightmare it is. That's part of the reason we have these peer support workshops. But we will be doing a second part of this workshop. The other Power Connectors will be doing workshops as well. And then I would also say that we and many of the other Power Connectors we work with regularly have more focused webinars and events on particular funding opportunities. So we've done things like just focus on Inclusive Energy Innovation Prize or Community Clean Energy Prize, and that's a deep dive in those opportunities and how we walk you through how to apply for them. So I think the peer workshop would be a good opportunity to walk through the how do you find things. And then if you come to those individual events on the particular opportunity, we'll do more deep dive on the process for applying for those specific programs.
And go ahead.
If I can add something, Lynn, who was the person that asked the question?
Stan Johnson.
Stan. So Stan, think of it this way. You have a grant writer. So I'm going to use a baseball analogy. When you're looking for that starting pitcher that can give you 250 innings a year, pitch into the 7th inning in their starts so that you don't have to overstress your relievers and can get you 15 to 20 wins per season, that's your grant writer. That's your foundation to start with. Now, here's the other thing we're giving you. Because of the information we're giving you the signals that the other team is using to tell the batters when to swing on. So now your grant writer has the signals in terms of the resources that are here in the link, and then what we're going to put together and give you in the resource doc to know where to go to pull information. That'll make their life a whole lot easier to be able to be effective for you. So then you can start to build the rest of your team, your number 2 starter, your number 3, your cleanup hitter, your shortstop that can turn the 5-4-3 double play, and build the rest of your team and build your community.
I'm
Yeah,
with you. I just want to make sure that that's what I'm hearing here. We're going to walk through this together.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to add
and
that one way we can. Sorry, go.
No, you're fine.
I just want to say that in your quarter, or I'm not sure how often, monthly or quarterly, you meet with NREL and you can email us and all the other power connectors. If you have specific things like, I would like to be, if the most important thing is being walked through how to apply tax credits, as you've seen, there's so many resources for us to even mention that we're happy to provide more details on ones, but we'd love to hear from you that like, which of these slides is the one that you want to dive deeper into. And then as power connectors, we can talk about, okay, who's going to say that in the next workshop, because we are going to provide more in-depth things, but the more, if you see opportunities and say, this is what we want to learn more about, you can always tell that to the NREL staff or tell that to us. And then that can be the exact content we give.
Following up on one of the questions about going after those federal grants, and maybe it seems a little bit daunting. Lynn mentioned that oftentimes you can recycle content from one grant application to the next, and I think you may find that the barrier to entry on that first application is much higher than it is on the second, not only in recycling content, but just getting access to the various digital infrastructure, getting registered and so forth. So, perhaps you may not get the first federal grant you apply to, but it may set you up to land that second or third application.
And then also too, we're your pitching coach. So for that number 1 starter, somebody had to be the pitching coach to help them get there. Somebody had to help Justin Verlander or Jack Morris, and you can tell I'm a Michigander, to be able to be that number 1 starter for your team. So we're your pitching coach. We're going to help you grow and find and learn and answer questions. And don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, you're not going to get more and get further along the path.
I'm with you. That's what I'm asking. So I'm glad that this we saying the same thing. And I didn't get your name and number. So is there a way for you to like send that to me, or what do I need to do?
Oh, I will send that out as a part of the follow-up. But my name is Eric Foster, and I'm with CBN as well.
All right, Eric, I appreciate it. I remember you now. Me and you have a personal connection, but we'll talk about that a little later on.
All right, all right.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I am Stan's grant writer. But just a piece of advice just a piece of advice for anyone who has not ever done a federal contract. The way that we got into the federal arena was by teaming with organizations, other nonprofits that have gotten into the federal arena. So they knew the ropes and helped us along the way. So we were subcontractor first, and then we actually are a contractor on a DOE or EPA grant. So now, but we had to work our way up.
That's a great point. And collaborations. And I think actually, one of the things we discussed at the in-person workshop in DC was that there could be some partnerships like that arise out of this group of IEIP awardees to go after bigger chunks of funding, where you're each taking a piece of that pie and that work. So, as well as kind of working with established grant recipients in your community. So just to note in the chat, we also put this resource for the American-made matching tool where you can connect with additional connectors that have specific areas of expertise, such as grant writing, Upwork, Allie's putting in the chat to find grant writers. We are also hearing from certain connectors that are working on suggested lists. And so if we get those, we'll pass those around. But just to also echo earlier what Annabelle said, we'll follow up. We're working with NREL and other power connectors on a survey to find out more about what it is you want to know more about. Consider this the 101 level, but we can keep working our way up, to the 401 or 501 class level. We want to hear more about your interests. So Stan, for example, feel free to follow up and tell us more about which things would be interesting to you.
I most definitely will. I really appreciate this, guys.
Well, are there any additional questions? I recognize we're over the hour here. Do want to be respectful of folks' time. Feel free to drop off if you have to, but happy to stay on a little bit longer if there are additional questions. I did want to highlight, Ali, my colleague at CEBN did just highlight upwork.com. That is upwork.com as a good resource for trying to track down freelance grant writers that may be able to assist you as you navigate this process.
Yeah, I also just wanted to flag earlier, Seed Knoxville, they had mentioned that DOE now splits most grants into a concept paper and then a final application. I think that's a really good point, that they'll often provide feedback for you on your application ahead of you actually having to submit the full thing. So that's, I think, a really good indication. Like if you're considering applying for something, go ahead and try that concept paper and see what they tell you. And then that can be a good determination for whether you should go for the full grant or not. And a lot of times they, DOE and other federal agencies, they want you to be successful in applying for these prizes as much as possible. They'll have webinars. They might highlight other resources for applying for these grants. So it's always good just to see also what the agency itself is providing for you to make the application process as easy as possible. Because I think that they're very aware that it can be a tedious process.
Great. Well, looks like there are no further questions. I think maybe it's about time to wrap up. I do want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank Eric for serving as a co-presenter, and for everyone, your enthusiastic participation. And we will see you again on December 16th at our IEIP Peer Discussion Workshop. Come prepared to hopefully discuss some of the opportunities you've tracked down and the various resources we've provided. Come with more questions. We look forward to seeing you there, and may the force be with you, as they say.
Great man, Andy. You're a great man.
We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, guys.